guys, and welcome back to the EB Expo. My name is Zorine. I am the eSports and Community Manager for GameSpot Australia, and today we're going to talk about eSports. So we've got some very special guests on the panel with us today. I'll introduce them. On the far right we have here Derek Reball, also known as Docs in the StarCraft 2 communities. He's done lots of StarCraft 2 events before, and he's helped coordinate them, as well as being an ex-pro competitive Warcraft 3 player. So thank you for joining us, Docs. Also notably, he is the team manager for Team Nvidia, which carries some of Australia's top StarCraft players like Moonglade, Rossi, YJ, and Jazzbaz. Also here we have Craig Warren, also known as Pandan, who is an esports consultant and has a history with Counter-Strike, Call of Duty. He is the founder and manager of Archaic Esports, I believe, as well as Team Gamecom. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Steve Androu, who's also known as PyroZero, who's one of the co-founders of The Shadowloo, which is one of Australia's biggest fighting game organisations. So thanks very much, guys, and welcome to the show. One of the first things I guess we will talk about is just general esports for people who may not know what esports is about, or who may want to take a look at competitive gaming and they don't know where to start. I mean, like, the way it is, information for esports at the moment, I think it's a little bit convoluted. So, you know, what do you guys think about where the esports information is at the moment in Australia?
Well, I guess at the moment with esports, one of the things that's really happening is that it's a very niche community, and for people to get involved, it's very, very challenging because it's kind of one of those things where you don't know about it unless you're already in it. But it's kind of growing. We've seen a lot of growth over the last 2 years, and I think competitive titles like League of Legends and StarCraft 2 had a lot to do with that. We're seeing new games like Dota 2 and Counter-Strike Global Offensive pop into the scene recently, which are really helping to grow that community. So I mean, events like this at EB Expo, we have a dedicated hall for esports, which is really going a long way to help promote it.
What do you think, Craig?
I think it's more, I was actually talking with Rossi, one of our sponsored StarCraft 2 players, the other day, and we're thinking of more real-life comparisons. We think, say, competitive ping pong. If we wanted to get into and be representing Australia in ping pong, how hard is it to get that information? I think we're actually suffering the same problems. Right now, if I wanted to go and try and play a little bit more stranger, more niche sports, it's really hard to find any information, and I think we actually have the exact same issue that some of those sports have, except they seem to get a lot more exposure than us.
Definitely. Oh, what do you think about that, Steve? Do you have anything to add about?
I think it's mostly accurate. Finding information on your designated stream of games is quite hard. There's no single go-to person for each stream.
Yeah.
So we sort of need to represent ourselves as leaders in each facility or column for game. That would make it easier for esports in Australia.
Yeah, I think at the moment one of the biggest things is live streaming, of course, and because of the introduction of people like Twitch and Owned and TV, which are live streaming services, it is a little bit easier. Say for example, if you want to go onto Twitch and you take a look at fighting games, you want to look at fighting games, and you can actually search, and go look at the games there and see who's live streaming at the moment. And I think that's a really good start. But the way it is at the moment, information is really hard to find. The communities are hard to track down. Like, if I wanted to be into StarCraft 2 in Australia, where would I go? Do I go to StarCraft 2C, or do I go to the Blizzard website? It's a bit convoluted. So I guess in a way that kind of leads on to my next topic, which I think you guys have a lot of familiarity with. With the way Australia's esports scene is set at the moment, do you think that we're suffering from a lot of self-cannibalism, or do you think we need sort of like an overruling, like a body, like how FIFA, the FIFA Federation works, to monitor and look at everything?
I think at this stage there is a lot of concern about self-cannibalism with esports in Australia. One of the biggest issues is that we have so many, well not so many, but some big organizations that are really kind of pushing out the grassroots stuff. And there needs to be a balance where the grassroots organizations can be allowed to grow, whilst the big ones can be there to provide the mainstream audience, the good content. So I guess one of the biggest challenges at the moment is finding the right kind of people or the right person to kind of drive that initiative forward. And at this stage, I mean, we've seen some great stuff pop up, at least in the StarCraft community over the last year, with ACL bringing StarCraft 2 on board in their circuit, and we've seen some really big stuff happening. And the end result was the Blizzard World Championship Series in Sydney last month. It was enormous, one of the biggest events we've ever seen in the country. But the scary part is we need to make sure that we have more people looking into getting into esports, because it's all well and good to have an event of that magnitude, but if there's no one else really willing to get involved, it starts to really dwindle, and that's a big concern for 2013.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the idea of this. We have some really good flagship products like the WCS, but even just speaking very briefly in the past with Pyro, more with Ali, he's one of the co-founders, one of the helpers of Shadowloo as well. Dan in the fighting game community, Berserk, as might know him, and a couple of other key figures, Talno from Cybergamer, Arsinims, and Simcore, who pretty much run New Zealand and all of their bar crafts. We have actually been working on the last 12 months or so on one consolidated product, where we still have our isolated products like Shadowloo and ACL and all these other ones, but they all consolidate into one place at ESAU. So the idea of this site, we're calling it eSports Australia, and we've had some in-depth chats. We haven't come to the front with releasing it as a product yet, because we still need to make sure that we're not affecting a product. Shadowloo, for example, is an amazing product. I like to compare it on par with Evo, but a little bit smaller because it's Australia, right? It's a really good product, but if we try and push it too far into this big consolidated FIFA body and try and have it get taken over, you're going to lose what makes Shadowloo so important and so great. So we need to make sure that each of these little communities, we pull in ACL, we pull in Shadowloo, we pull in SE2, SEA, these other little events and Cybergamer and whatnot. We need to make sure we keep the heart in it, because that's what esports is really all about. There may be some money for some big players, but it's really about the heart of it. And if they all join this body, they still need to keep their unique point of sale and their point of interest in their product.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Like, what if some organizations, don't wish to work together, or they don't want to consolidate with each other? And that's
generally, being perfectly honest, the people that we've seen object to that aren't the people like the Shadowloo, and they aren't these big brands. It's really a lot of the people who've come in the last 12 to 18, maybe 24 months that have just started getting into it. And without sugarcoating it, I think some of them perhaps have lived a little bit more of a sheltered life and a bubble wrap life, and they think they're invincible, and unfortunately they're not. And it's quite obvious to see their failures, and it is very disappointing. Even people like Ali and Steve here offering assistance to other people and getting rejected because they're like, no, we can do it, and then they fail, and it can be really upsetting to see something with such promise just get driven into the ground because people refuse to accept assistance. It's very disappointing at times.
What do you think about that, Steve?
I agree with Craig on all of the points. I guess it is important to cut down things and have a unified body, but at the same time keeping heart in sort of communities. Like, there's a certain dedication that comes from heart for a game that is not matched by money or volunteers or these numbers, right? You'll see dudes that spend 16, 17 hours, a day approaching majors that'll bust all of it to get it all done, but you won't see that sort of dedication from people that are looking at the bottom line sort of stuff.
Yeah.
While we get profit is good to keep it going and generate bigger numbers and evolve, it's definitely to keep that dedication and that core community at heart.
Yeah, the heart's incredibly important in esports. That's what started it, and that's what's going to keep it going forward.
Self-cannibalism, it is increasingly becoming a problem, I agree, but I think as long as we keep our good intentions, we can overcome it.
There was a few months earlier this year in the StarCraft 2 community that we kind of discovered that there were a lot of different organizations trying to burst out into the scene with their sort of groundbreaking events, and because of this, they didn't want to reveal any information before they were ready to launch. And as a result, we saw a lot of events overlapping, which obviously has a significant detriment to the community, because there's just so many events happening at the same time, you can't attend all of them. And it really has a severe impact on the players and the community as well, because, you're dwindling and watering down your attendance, your prize pool, everything gets impacted when people don't cooperate with scheduling and announcing their events. So one thing that would really, really help, and this is really utopian, but it would be cool if some way, somehow, everyone who was involved in organizing esports events just got together in some sort of unified medium where they could communicate with each other and talk about, this is what I've got happening, I'm thinking about doing it in July. Anyone else got anything happening in July? And then people can work together to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, because the end result is a low return on investment from the sponsors, who are the people who fuel these events. On top of that are the people who put in a lot of their own money as well. If you end up with half as much attendance because there's people at this, like a Gigabyte event and an Asus event on the same time, it doesn't really work out for either the consumer or the person investing the money.
And I think that was a big problem actually that happened before. I mean, like WCG and SG all ran on the same day, and like, you know, our pool of players in Australia is only so big, and our exposure is only so limited. So it's important that these organisations talk to each other. But that being said, do you think that at the moment, because there is no overruling body to sort of facilitate the relationships between everyone, do you think that Australian esports can continue to survive without one at the moment, with the way things are?
Well, I can't really speak for StarCraft, but what I've seen in the fighting game community is that there's less like circuitry. Like you guys have ACL circuits that travel around Australia. You also have MLG that do America. I think do they do Europe? I'm not sure yet. But we in the fighting game community, we don't really have that sort of circuit stuff going. So it leaves us with 52 weekends in a year and everybody in the entire world, right? So you try to lock in your event on a certain weekend ahead of time, and then you have other companies or organizations that want to put their event on the weekend, and then it comes down to like time zone splitting and things like this. So we try to keep our events separate from everyone else, so everyone gets a fair go at everything in terms of viewership and stuff for streams and sponsors and whatnot. So yeah, something needs to happen to improve organization, not only just in Australia but on a world scale. I'm not too sure about the other games and how much of a problem that is, but I've noticed for us that trying to find a time to book in a major like Shadowloo Showdown, we had to move the date 2 or 3 times, and even then we still ended up overlapping. So yeah.
Do you think it's a matter of talking to like maybe international people, like looking outside of Australia as well? So for example, Shadowloo, you guys obviously would keep in touch with Evo and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a matter of maybe, you know, I guess in a way like forming a body with them?
With Evo, they run usually July, and this year they ran exceptionally early. And there's this thing in fighting games where like after Evo, everybody takes a break. It's unwritten law, right? As soon as the biggest major is done, people go on a holiday or something. So everybody that wants to take a big, say, event, they want to try and get it in before Evo or the lead up to Evo, because then it's sort of like it all builds up and then drops off. So Evo ran in July, which is like maybe 20 weeks into the year. So there's only 19 weekends from your 52. Yeah. So communication would help. Yeah, I think.
What about you guys? Do you think Australian organisations should really, well, assimilate, I guess, in a way into the international big leagues and like take on the name?
Well, I think it's a bit of a challenge, to be honest. I mean, it really comes down to agendas, and different organizations have different roles in the community. Some will be there for the profit, some will be there for the exposure. Some are just volunteers that want to see the community grow. And that's one of the biggest issues we have, is that clash of agendas between different organizations. But, I mean, ultimately, we don't have any governing body, and I don't see it happening anytime in the near future unless someone just steps up and invites everyone on board and says, hey, look, this is what we got to do. But, I mean, the scene has been growing significantly without it, which means I think we'll be okay in the long term, but we could see so much more growth and more consistent benefits if everyone was under some sort of governing body.
Yeah, I mean, there already is plans for next year to see a lot of events. Instead of, like this year we had in the June-July school holidays, we had about 3 weekends where there was 3 separate events on in 3 different states and all these different things. We have already been speaking with several different people who have been planning to run their events on the Australia Day weekend. We're trying to get, instead of having, you know, as one example, a Counter-Strike event in a Net Cafe in Brisbane, and then a Call of Duty one in a Net Cafe in Sydney, and then some other League of Legends event in Melbourne. We're already working together to try and get all of those under the one banner in the one event, and all of them at the same time, and try and get it, if we can, on the Australia Day weekend as well. The idea being there that, you know, instead of having all these spread out, we can have people all traveling to the one event, and you're exposed to other games as well as just the one that you play. It's much better for the return on investment for the sponsors. And we've already laid the groundwork for it. We're still looking for a new venue for it. Based on the people who have already signed up, we're already looking at comfortably 600 to 1,000 people in attendance for that event for the Australia Day weekend. And we've already got their existing sponsor relationships on board. So, you know, we'll have Gamecom, we'll have Western Digital, Kingston, Coolmaster, all of those big quintessential, ASUS of course, all those quintessential Australian esports sponsors will be with us on Australia Day weekend. And we just need to figure out whether we're going to do that in Melbourne or Sydney. I don't think Brisbane's the best one for that, but I'm really looking at the main esports games to be there. We're already starting to get there. The thing that'll be different is, as Steve knows, is fighting game a fighting game community, or is it an esport? And then there's that whole, you obviously it's still great to have them at the same events, but then if we call this bigger an esport event, is it really an esport event?
Yeah.
It's really two separate events within the one, but obviously Shadowloo, it needs to be its own separate thing and then have its own, smaller events off to the side as well.
Fighting games are slowly becoming esports. As much as you'll hear people kicking and screaming, it's a matter of time.
I'm of the opinion that fighting games almost created esports. That's my opinion, even though some people think that fighting games aren't an esport. I think they practically created the category themselves.
Well, that's the thing at the moment, like all the games are kind of really separate. I mean, the fighting game community stick to themselves, the StarCraft 2 community stick to themselves, and like, the FPS, Counter-Strike and COD and all those communities, they all stick to themselves and they don't really talk to each other.
I don't think it's so much they stick to themselves. Pretty much everybody that I play with, because they go across a range of different games, these guys are more isolated to their own specific, but every single one of those people in those games play the other games, watch the other games, participate in those games. We put them all under the one roof. People are going to be like, oh, Moonglade's playing, I'm a Counter-Strike player, but damn, Moonglade's good to watch. Or, I'm a StarCraft player, but, look at these Call of Duty guys. Look at their coordination with their grenades. Probably not Call of Duty because they're not really good players, but Counter-Strike perhaps, there's some really good coordination in there.
I can vouch for this. I saw this weekend, I saw Moonglade playing in the Street Fighter 4 tournament here.
He's awesome.
And I think Rossi was playing, and a few other guys. I was standing behind them, watching them. It's starting to cross over. I mean, I like to try and attend the barcraft sort of stuff, the more socially events for me. But it's very interesting to see players taking an interest in other like genres.
I don't think it's so much that the communities are isolated. I don't think they're being facilitated to interact together. Because
definitely.
These guys definitely play all the other games. I know Docs plays like 5 different games.
Yeah, on that note, there's actually something I've been looking to do with my own team, NV, recently, to try and expand into other games, just to try and bridge gaps between communities. Because I know myself personally, I play a lot of competitive StarCraft, and I've started playing not a lot, but some competitive COD lately. And it's a lot of fun getting involved with the different communities, meeting different people, and breaking down those barriers, those stigmas that exist within the communities where they just kind of, I guess you could say, unanimously agree amongst themselves that our game is the best, everything else sucks. And it's this weird organic sort of thing that grows within the communities that shouldn't be there. And if you just get to know the people, you realize they're just passionate gamers like you. They love a game, you love a game, everyone should just hang out and enjoy games together. So it's really cool to see stuff like that, where the guys are going to events and playing all different games together, as he was talking about before with Moonglade and Rossi playing Street Fighter.
It's one thing that I really loved about the CGS, even though it ended up being a failure. It had, several different games, and they were all pretty interesting to watch. I thought it was a good concept, a good play on the idea. Obviously wasn't executed the best it could have been, but everybody was interested in more than just Counter-Strike or just DOA or just racing games.
Did you have anything to add to that, Steve?
No, it's very accurate. I agree.
Okay, well I guess my next question is sort of a tie-on that. I'm talking about players and casters. Now, earlier this year, there was a League of Legends, the MLG Fall Championship, and I'm sure you guys would have heard about this, where the 2 top teams actually colluded to share the prize money, and they actually played what was known as an all-random, all-middle game in the grand final, well not the grand final, but the final for that region. And as a result, they were actually disqualified from that league, and the prize money, which I believe was a hefty amount, I can't remember off the top of my head how much it was, but MLG actually stripped them of $40,000 US. They were stripped of that prize, and that prize was actually reallocated to 3rd and 4th place, as well as all their points taken away. Now, do you think players should be held to a standard? I mean, at the moment, because esports is a fairly new thing, there's no laws that really, monitor how the code of conduct that players have. It's not like how athletes are sort of, monitored and held in a way that they have to represent themselves in their organization. Do you think that we need that for players and casters at the moment?
Well, as far as code of conduct goes, yes. It's something that really needs to be enforced. But speaking on behalf of the StarCraft community, the whole collusion thing does happen quite a bit. We see some players very, very often in a lot of global events splitting prize pools, but they kind of keep it hush-hush because it makes the scene look a little bit unprofessional when you do that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's something that I'd like to see evaporate over time because it does kind of diminish the prestige of that first place a little bit if you just see the guys go backstage and say, hey, let's split the prize. But I think, in circumstances like that, it should definitely be kept under the table, but over time, it'd be good if it just stopped happening altogether.
It could also, the other way to look at it is, what if somebody played, just as another perspective, I don't particularly agree with it, but the other perspective is, what if they had a big huge best of 9 series that came down right to the wire, and they were both about to win, and it only just lost. And he said, "Look, it was a really good game. I appreciate your competition. Here, I'll give you half. You know, we'll split the prize money because you're a tough competitor, perhaps." Maybe there was nothing to split them in that gap. Obviously, this League of Legends one is pretty blatant abuse of that circumstance. But I mean, that situation does arise too. That is a form of sportsmanship in and of itself.
I can't say I agree. I think if you're going to be a professional gamer, a professional anything, you need to stick to a code of ethics. Just sort of, it'll raise the standard in a competitive sense, right? There's no point in playing for second. Like, there's no point in playing to just split a pot and not find out who's the best, because then you get substandard performances, like where they just do something silly, right? And then you leave a bad mark on your own community, right? Because you're mucking around, and all these sponsors put all this effort and money and product into your event, and then they see you clowning around and sharing it around.
I totally agree with you. Anything that lowers the quality of the games, I'm totally against.
Yeah.
But if after the fact, after a really grueling, solid series, they voluntarily do it, I'm okay with that. But if as long as the game is solid at their best of ability at that point in time,
as long as it's not
I'm
determined
totally okay
before the event.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you know, actually, I find myself agreeing with both of you, because I have a problem with it if it's premeditated. But if it happens after it's all said and done, in your example, where it's like, you know, that was really close.
Yeah.
Respect. We'll share the
That's what
prize.
I think. I think that's sportsmanship in and of itself. Yeah.
Definitely.
But at the same time, I mean, when it's premeditated, you already know that competitive drive behind the finals has already been diminished.
Yeah.
You know, not every player is potentially
knowing that
playing
it
at their
doesn't
maximum
ride on that
capacity.
last game takes all the nervous tension out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you lose that risk of loss if you're doing it, and then there's no pressure, and then you're not going to be playing at your best, because some people, like Andy, for example, play better under pressure.
Exactly.
So,
Well, I have to say, like, you know how you say, like, you know, splitting the money afterwards, or like saying to the person, like, you know, oh, you know, you played really well. Here's some of the money. I'm happy to, you know, for you to do whatever with it. I actually don't agree with that. You know, I think, and I'm sorry, but like, you know, I think, you know, you're players. You're playing for a prize, and you're supposed to uphold, you know, the standard. And it's actually, it was written in the MLG rule book that they're not allowed to do that, and you know, they got disqualified for it.
yeah, it's in the rule book, then too bad, isn't it?
But that being said, that also leads on to, I guess, social media. I mean, players are, you know, easily accessible nowadays. They're live streaming on Twitch from their homes. You know, they're on the social media on Twitter and Facebook. Do you think that they should watch what they say?
It sort of depends. As long as, there's a whole different dynamic, well, not even different, it's the exact same dynamic you get with football players and other sports. Some people are trying to portray an archetype, whether they're doing it on purpose or their sporting team is putting them into that archetype, whether, you know, they're a big blokey bloke or they're a little bit aggressive, they're a bit ragey. I'm sure you can think of some StarCraft examples off the top of your head. But, you know, some of those people are meant to portray that archetype, and when they go outside of that, then that can, you know, negatively impact the goal that a marketing person may have on them. But as far as, I know you're sort of alluding more to swearing and, you know, a little bit more along the lines of things that Idra may have said about a developer a couple of weeks ago. I both agree and disagree. I don't think he should have used that particular phrasing, but I don't think in any way it was out of character what we expect from that person and the marketing persona for that character to say what he said. I think his choice of words was poor, especially considering that's basically the worst thing you can say, but I think it totally fit in with his persona, and I think it totally fits in with where he fits in with the community. In that particular example, I don't want to delve into it too much, but...
Okay, what do you think, Steve?
I think it's a very touchy subject. I think knowing the line and not when to cross it, it's okay to be yourself. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you don't have anything nice to say, maybe you should not be saying something. You know?
Well, some players are known for trash talking, and it's
Yeah,
not,
I
you know, it
understand
adds
where
to
you're
the
coming
spectacle
from.
as well.
I mean, it's about knowing the line. Trash talk. I mean, I'm an FGC representative here. This is what we sort of do as a secondary sport.
Drama, yeah.
But yeah, drama. But knowing the line, right? Yeah, it's a social measure. You have to just really know. If you know the other person and they're not going to be offended, then you have to worry about what your words will impact you as a person, as a marketable object, I guess. So just be careful.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of players in the StarCraft community who have built a reputation and marketed themselves on their, you know, really, really blunt upfront personalities. Like, you've got people like Hydra, you've got Destiny, even our very own Targa has built quite a reputation for himself around the world for being really, really blunt with people. And it's not something I necessarily agree or disagree with. It's just their personality type, and it's not that they're really projecting something that they don't have a lot of conviction in to the community. It's just them being themselves. Now, there may or may not be an appropriate place or an appropriate outlet for them to be themselves in the community, but it is what it is, I guess, and a lot of people are finding success in it. So I guess it really comes down to the fans to establish whether or not it's appropriate.
At the end of the day, who wants to watch them and how many people want to watch them be who they are?
But do you think they should be held accountable for things that they may have said and said and done in the past?
I think again that's I'll take it as it comes and see.
It's one of those.
You can't. It's one of those things where there's no way to put a blanket rule across it.
Yeah.
It needs to be measured as it goes, and it is generally self-ruling by the managers of teams, events, and organisations as well. And they know damn well what the line is because they get told straight away.
It's good for people to be held accountable for the stuff they say, and at the moment we're not really seeing a lot of repercussions, but on the other side of the fence we've seen some ridiculous circumstances where someone has lost their job over something they said to a guy on the internet in the privacy of their own bedroom like 6 months ago. There's some really ridiculous stuff, and I mean, we look at the StarCraft subreddit, and lately, anytime someone does anything that could be perceived as slightly inappropriate, it's upvoted to the top of Reddit. It is regarded as the most important and popular topic
Email
of the
to
community.
sponsors to try and get them
emails
dropped.
being sent to sponsors to get these guys out of their teams or to lose their jobs. It's getting a bit out of control. Accountability, yes, but I think there's an extreme that really shouldn't be approached.
Yeah. There definitely should be a degree of leniency. I mean, when a person is in a heated situation, they might not be thinking, too straight. So.
But even so, for these guys, this is their job, and in any other everyday job, if someone was to do something like that and in a way that represents their organization, that's who they are, they'd be fired or at least punished on the spot.
I both agree and disagree because we look some case in point examples. Chris Brown, Kobe Bryant. When have they ever actually been punished for what they've done? So I agree that they should be, but in the real world, I don't really think that.
So do you think we should start fining players?
I actually think that there should be, if anything that impacts the quality of a game, 100%, I think there should be fines in place. If they go out of their way to show up late and they try and get in, or they go out of their way to lower the quality of a game, they try and match fix, those sort of things, definitely I think fines should be in place, 100%.
So it comes back to sort of like a code of ethics or a standard?
Yeah, well, actually, in Team Gamecom, Nv, who's part of Team Gamecom, and any tournaments that we run or are involved in, a code of conduct is mandatory to sign before you even receive a penny or you compete or do anything. And our code of conduct is pretty straightforward. It's the same kind of conduct you would have working for GameSpot here, on the stream. It's pretty straightforward. Bottom line is, don't be an idiot.
But who would be the organisation to enforce these rules, do you think? Should it be the sponsors, or should it be the managers, or should it be that overruling body that we hypothetically spoke about that needs to be that needs to exist?
I guess it comes down to the organizations who are sponsoring or promoting these individuals. I mean, there are organizations out there who will pick up an individual or a player and they'll just disregard their personality dysfunction and they'll just happily bring that guy on board for his popularity or for his skill and just say, you know what, we don't care if he offends a lot of people. And that's, as Craig was saying, that's something that we hold in very high regard for Team NV. We make sure that we bring on really good people that people get along with and people like. It's priority number one for us.
I think if you have a rule set that is agreeable on a tournament organizer and a sponsor or even a team management, as long as you can all come to some sort of agreement of a rule set or a behavior model, then it should be fine.
Yeah, I think maybe in this area a governing body might have a standard set of rules that organisations might take on board, for example. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think whoever's running that organisation and whoever's sponsoring that player are the only two that should really ever fine someone at this point in time.
Okay, cool. Well, we're actually happy to take some questions from the live audience. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask us. We're talking about esports and competitive gaming. So we've got Doc's here from StarCraft 2 scene, and he's an ex-Warcraft 3 competitive player. He also manages Team Nvidia, which looks after some of Australia's best StarCraft 2 players, Moonglade, Rossi, Jazzbaz from New Zealand, and also we have Craig, Pandan, Warren, for those who missed it before. He's an esports consultant, ex-Call of Duty / Counter-Strike player, does a lot of FPS stuff, I guess. And also Steve, who is the co-founder of The Shadowloo. So if you've got any fighting game scene questions, feel free to let him know. Do we have any questions from the live audience? Anything about competitive gaming? Yes, down the front.
What is your question? I'm just thinking, you were talking about how there's the segregation of organizations and events being put on by sponsors and things like that, like the Gigabyte LANs and things like that. Do you feel that while sponsors are putting on events, there's always going to be agenda that's not going to be overcome, and it should be more focused on organizations separate to the sponsors that might be powered by numerous sponsors that might not have that individual agenda to follow? Is that a better road for esports, or are these individual events still an important factor in growth in esports?
Okay, so did you guys hear that question?
I missed the second half of that, sorry.
I think the question is about whether it's better to allow sponsors to kind of organize their own events, or whether to do like separate individual events and kind of where the future of esports is headed. So is it like a sponsored route, or like a perhaps individual kind of tournament?
So do you mean whether the sponsors should organize the events or the esports organizations themselves should organize the events? Is that what you mean?
I think it's more hitting towards, do you go the ACL model or the ACES Pro-Am? That's what you're getting more at? Yeah.
Okay, well that's an interesting question. Well, I'll let you guys start with that.
Me?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. I actually personally am a big fan of both models. I think that there's something that should work in unison together. I don't think there's something that should be totally this one or totally that one. I think that should definitely be together. Because when you're looking at, I'll just use Australian reference to, actually I'll go MLG because there's a lot more people. MLG brings in their own different sponsors and they run their own things. You know, they'll have Dr. Pepper or whomever joining them and backing what they do. But at the same time, you'll have Red Bull running their own arenas. I don't think there's any problem with those two existing in unison. I think it's actually fantastic because there's not always going to be a constant tournament going on at all times. There's a good gap filler, and maybe Red Bull specifically want to target StarCraft scene, or they want to target Halo or something like that in the meantime, and maybe they can't get it from one of these organizations. Maybe let's just say MLG weren't running Counter-Strike and Red Bull specifically desperately wanted to hit it and target the Counter-Strike audience. They might have to run another Red Bull arena, and I think that's perfectly fine, and I strongly back it actually. I've been encouraging Gamecom to do it themselves, definitely would encourage ACES to do it. I think it's perfectly fine, as long as it doesn't take away from those events that have the heart, as we were saying before.
Well, the reason I asked Craig to go first is I was just going to say I agree. I mean, having both is fantastic. Anything that promotes growth and competition is fantastic with me.
I personally don't see why both can't work. I'd be more worried to watch the sponsor run ones because maybe a lack of experience. But if it's outsourced to a community or a local scene, then there's no reason why they both can't be great models.
I guess the other cool part about that is that one of the individuals or one of the organizations can bring on board a new concept or try something that the others haven't thought of before, and it really helps to just keep raising the bar across the entire community, which is really good.
And esports organizations in general usually have more experience running these events, and you know these people, they do it for the pure love of it. You know, there's no money motivation. It's just about passion for esports. And you know, one of the best events I went to this year was the Blizzard WCS Championships, and you know that was awesomely run. Blizzard works in conjunction with ACL Pro, and they work together to bring an awesome event to the viewers. So I thought that was a bit of both. A bit of both works well for everyone. Do we have another question from the audience? Anyone? Not the moment. Well, I have another question of my own to follow up with. So, after everything that we talked about just now, what do you think is the next logical step that needs to happen for Australian esports to really push to the next level?
This is a very long, a question with a potentially long answer. I'll try to keep it down as much as possible. Over the last 2 years, since we've seen this massive boom in esports, where it's really, really revived the community and driven this massive passion globally, we've seen a lot of new people enter the industry. There's been a lot of veterans who've been around for, say, like 10 years or something, who've just been kind of trudging through it, trying to push it forward, not making tremendous progress, and then there's this enormous boom that has really attracted a lot of new people to the scene. So to give one example, we have people like Tasteless and Artosis, world-famous StarCraft 2 commentators who positioned themselves in Korea before the launch of StarCraft 2 so they could capitalize on that and really, really just thrive on the success of StarCraft 2. And that's something amazing. That is a really, really cool thing to see. But on the other side of the coin, we see people who now have just joined the scene in 2010 or 2011, and they see the success of people like Faceless and Artosis, and they say, I want to be famous like that. And instead of coming up with their own opportunities or their own potential methods of reaching that success, they kind of just try to, they copycat, and they force themselves down the throat of the community by saying, just watch my stream, follow me on Twitter. And it's all about self-promotion. It's not about the industry anymore. It's not about the players or the games anymore. It's just all about them. And this is a really cancerous sort of vibe that we're seeing in the community. It's been spreading like crazy over the last year and a half, at least in StarCraft 2. I'm not sure about the other games. But lately, the more we watch, the more we see people just promoting their own Twitters and YouTubes and Twitch pages. And the scary part for me is you can watch a lot of streams these days. You'll get like 5 minutes into a StarCraft match. The commentator hasn't even introduced the players yet. He's still talking about himself. I want to see less of that.
Yeah, no, just before Steve goes, I've seen the amount of people I've seen just here locally in the scene, Australia, and including New Zealand as well, where the tournament organisers have 10 times as many followers as the actual organisation itself on Facebook or Twitter. I think that's the most illogical and borderline irresponsible thing for someone to do as an event organizer. I want to see the Shadowloo account with tens of thousands of followers and, Steve and Ali with just, the people they communicate with. That's how it should be, because Shadowloo's the one giving out the press release and inspiring people to get involved.
So you guys are more talking about celebritism in eSports. I think that's a side point to growth or logical stepping. I think for us locally, we need to minimize how many people ask how they can join their local community. It should be bleedingly obvious. It should be natural almost. So you guys have the StarCraft Dash has advertising for competitive sports on the right. See, fighting games, nothing like that. You have streams, and then even streams are just like you said, some people don't talk, or there's self-promotion and celebritism that just sort of gets in the way, people pushing their own agendas. I think we all just need to focus on the bigger picture, and it's hard. Humans are naturally like this, but everybody wants to be in the spotlight once in a while, so we just need to find more people like Ali. He'll put himself out there to he'll push everything he has into making sure the organization does well rather than himself.
Yeah, we wanted to show a true example of ultimate passion and personal commitment, both financially, mentally, physically. It's Ali all the way.
Oh yeah, and I think everyone's sitting on the couches here.
Just to summarize that, I saw a quote a while ago, and I can't remember where I saw it, but it really, really stuck with me. And it was that these days a lot of people are working for, what was the word, compliments rather than accomplishments. And I find that's really, really true in esports at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. You see people coming up with new techniques or combos, and they'll be like, "Yeah, that's my combo." Spread it around, and then that's it. They don't want to play tournament. They just want to be known for this combo or this moment. They want their 15 seconds. You should probably focus on becoming better.
Okay, well, we actually just had a question from the stream. So someone asked, what events can Oceanic players be looking forward to both this year and the next?
As far as StarCraft goes, we don't have a lot left this year, as far as I'm aware. Things tend to quieten down towards the end of the year. We really have our busy periods between like May and August most of the time. There could be some things in the pipeline that I'm not aware of that people have, keeping under wraps for the time being, but keep an eye out from January onwards. As Craig was saying before, there's some big stuff coming on the Australia Day weekend. And after that, things are just going to start snowballing again. So for now, chill out. Just enjoy all the great games that have been coming out recently. That's what a lot of the StarCraft guys do. They look forward to this time of the year so they can catch up on everything else that's come out over the last 8 months. But in the new year, things are going to get a lot bigger. Yeah,
definitely agree with Docs. We should be going outside, enjoying summer just a little bit, and then getting back into it. Yeah, me especially. One
at a 10, yeah.
Yeah, so I think for fighting games, if you're interested, the Ozado Nationals is probably going to be the next great big major locally, and that took place in February last year, so probably that would be the next biggest one coming up.
Is that likely going to be in Sydney again? Or
that is always run in Sydney every year. And then probably the one after that would be Shadowloo Showdown 2013 in Melbourne, and then BAM or something like Battle Arena in Melbourne. Yeah. Or even Button Smash and the guys that do Spring Smash and all that. Yeah,
generally in the even pretty much the entirety of the last 10 years, This time of year there might be some local lands, maybe a Melbourne land, a Sydney, or a Brisbane land, or WA land, of course, as well. But generally, most of the stuff for PC anyway will just be an online tournament that sort of ends either the end of November or start of December. So you'd be looking at sites like Cybergamer, GT eSports, SC2 SEA will probably run a team league or something like that as well. There'll be a lot of online leagues that'll wrap up the year, and then we'll start in the LAN towards the end of, again, the end of January, start of February. Then we'll hit that peak from May through the end of pretty much now. It's always a pretty solid time.
That's usually the peak time.
So now's the time to work on hidden techniques and matchup knowledge, and then come out in 2013 fighting and do really well for yourselves.
Yeah, so in Australia, the things that you'll want to be checking out is, head on to GameSpot's page and Twitch page and check out. We're going to have the WCS World Finals for StarCraft. We're going to have ESWC, MLG and Dallas, which are the Gamecom NV guys are going to be at. You're mostly going to be watching and participating in some online comps and some local lands, I think.
Awesome. Anything else to add, guys? No? Okay. So, do we have any more questions from the audience or the live stream? Anyone got any more questions they'd like to add? Yes?
This is mainly to the to docs and the SC community. What do you believe that our sponsors and organisations should be doing for our top players in order to be giving them worldwide exposure, not only to the players, but to the SC2 SCA scene in general?
Did you guys hear that?
No.
So what things do you think that the sponsors and organisations should be doing for the top players? Is that right? To improve exposure for the top players, what do you think the organisations and sponsors should be doing?
Basically, what people like Gamecom want from you and Andy.
Sponsors and organisations should be doing for the top players?
It actually requires a very specific relationship between the sponsor and the player. So it's not just about what the sponsor can do for the player, but you need really good marketable players, which will be a benefit to the sponsor. So I mean, earlier we were talking about some players who won't necessarily have the best public image. They're probably not the best kind of people that sponsors want to get involved with. But when you've got like a nice competitive guy who is really, really polite, interacts with the community or socializes with the fans at local events, that's the sort of guy you want to get on top of immediately. Use that to promote your brand, and you can invest as much as you want into him, and you'll see the returns. I mean, that's what we're seeing with some of the guys in NV. It's just fantastic. Long term, I'd like to see a lot more, especially in Australia, a lot more investment from sponsors in individuals, not necessarily teams. We've seen initially when Mindfreak started up, they picked up Targa, and they just went all in with him, and it was awesome. Since then, they picked up Aegis as well, and I mean, they've been supporting him, and that's really cool. But, I mean, you see people like Grubby, who is a really, really good example of the model on how one individual can be a brand of his own and represent multiple sponsors. I'd love to see that model extended all across the world, and especially in Australia, simply because funding an entire team can be daunting to a sponsor. But if you just fund an individual, you can see a lot of benefit there. That's what I'd like to see.
I think it might sound very cliche, but we should be looking at what players can be doing for sponsors rather than what sponsors can do for players, because if, as individuals, we can make it very lucrative and successful for sponsors, they will in turn show this out and then attract more. And then in that way, we will continue to evolve and grow. And it'll also breed better players, and the scene will just benefit from it all around. So definitely focus on what you can give back rather than what you can take for starters.
Yeah, exactly. And we, for myself, I work with Derek a little bit from the Gamecom relationship, sponsoring his team, and it's really good to see when we have our executive staff actually able to just call up Moonglade, see him in person regularly, have dinner with him, have a lunch with him, and discuss what's going on. I think that's really good, and I think people need to be more, instead of sending out emails to your sponsor and look at the graph, it went up. Nobody really cares. They want to have an engagement. They want to see a personality. They want to see who's representing their brand. And I think more people need to sort of actually go out of their way to physically meet with their sponsors wherever possible. And I think that, that's the kind of thing that gives the sponsor an assurance. They know what they're getting. They're seeing everything. They're seeing, Moonglade in Europe, or they're seeing, him over here in China or there or whatever. And that's really good, but actually getting to meet the person, know what they're like, and see that their personal vision aligns with what the company's vision is, I think that's really important.
I guess to add one more thing to that as well is that for one perfect example of the relationship between sponsor and individual or sponsor and team is, I'm not sure if many people have noticed, but we've had all of the NV guys, myself, GTR, Rossi, Jazzbaz, and Moonglade, over at the Gamecom booth all weekend, offering coaching for StarCraft 2 players. So you can sit down with the pros, and they'll teach you a few things. They'll ask you, what race do you play? What are you having trouble with at the moment? And they'll give you some lessons on how to improve. And that's a really good example of the relationship that can exist between the sponsor and the players.
Yeah, actually a follow-up from that is we have a new limited edition version of one of our headsets which Moonglade helped us design, and anybody who pre-orders that gets 3 hours worth of free training from anybody in Gamecom NV. And the players, that was part of the players' idea. That wasn't so much a marketing idea from the company. The players were like, hey, let's help you help us.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time, guys. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. For those of you watching in stream, we are heading into the homegrown hardware segment, so stay tuned and we'll have plenty more streams going on next. Next up, we've got the Halo 4 demo and QA with developers from 343 Industries, as well as PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale stream later on tonight. Thanks very much, guys.